Hello and welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, a podcast about all things travel. And today's greeting should really have been Kia ora, bro. We're talking New Zealand, a place dear to my heart and a place that TT has just got back from. And you just got back, you said it was a 31-hour journey and somehow you went via Sydney.
I thought we were doing this in Old Zealand.
No, this is we're new and modern. We're going for New Zealand.
Oh, it's new. It's New Zealand. Okay.
I was about to call that a dad joke. I feel like it barely qualifies as a joke.
I was in Auckland last.
You had 31 hours to think of a joke, and that was the best one you could.
Actually, yeah, and the problem is I didn't, and then I just thought of it in like 2 seconds.
Imagine what you could have come up with if you'd spent 31 hours on it. Yeah, but yeah, you just got back from Auckland. Sorry, I was just rinsing your dad joke.
I went last week, and then I flew back yesterday. Yeah, it was 31 hours from door to door of my hotel in Auckland to my house in Denver.
Explain why you went through Sydney.
That's just the way it was. I flew United, and airlines do weird things. And on the way there, I flew San Fran to Auckland. On the way back, they had us Auckland to Sydney to LA. So, yeah, I don't know.
That's brutal.
Yeah, we were looking at it. My son was like, "You realize we're going like backwards to Sydney?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I guess I didn't even really realize that on the map." But yeah, that's exactly what happened. But it was close to the same amount of time on the way there, and we did a tour, and they were asking how long it took everybody to get there. And it's amazing how far it took everyone to get to New Zealand. It's so far away. The worst for people from Europe, because you have to basically fly. I mean, what do? Fly to Asia and then fly from Asia down there?
Yeah, so just to give a bit of a background on why New Zealand's a place close to my heart, my uncle lives in New Zealand and has done since long before I was born. He's been there about 50 years. And we were very lucky when we were kids, we got to go. And then I ended up going and spending a year there between high school and university. And yeah, at the time, I was living, Manchester Airport was the nearest, and actually it was a pretty sweet deal because you could go Manchester, Singapore, and then Singapore direct to Christchurch. He lives in Christchurch on the South Island of New Zealand. But you're doing a 13-hour flight, 3-hour break, and then it's about 11 down from Singapore to Christchurch. So that is just, it's a savage journey. And people forget how far New Zealand is from everything. I mean, what is it to Sydney from Auckland? 3 hours? 3 and a bit?
3 and a bit, yeah. Well, and I was reading a thing, and it was saying that the coast of New Zealand and the coast of Australia is the same distance as Paris to Moscow.
Yeah, it's a long way. I mean, I remember when I came back, people said, "Oh, it must have been great. Like at weekends, you go to Australia." And I was saying, "Well, you live in London. Do you go to Morocco at the weekend?" I mean, it's a long way. It's a solid 3.5-hour flight from Christchurch to Sydney. So yeah, New Zealand is a long way from anything.
Yes, and I think that would be the one thing about living there full time, that if you really like to travel, that would be really tough. Is you're I don't know, you're kind of stuck there, other than there in Australia.
Yeah, that's the thing. To get somewhere that isn't really like New Zealand, as in somewhere that isn't Australia, it's kind of 10. You're probably looking at 8 to 10 hours basically to get anywhere. And I think, in my humble opinion, I love New Zealand, but I think it would be a really hard place to settle as an outsider, because it feels, psychologically, it feels a long way from anything. Sometimes maybe it's in my own head, but you can tell when you're on an island a long way from anything. It feels like Vancouver Island to me feels different from the mainland of Canada. It feels like you're on an island. And New Zealand, I think, feels like you're an awfully long way from anything. People's psychology is insular is a harsh word, but it's that far from the rest of the world that people often are quite focused on New Zealand. And I think that's just a geography thing.
Yeah, I notice a lot of pride in New Zealand there, which is nice because I miss having the pride I used to have for America. But they did manage. I did manage to get a few people laughing at me when I said I was from the U.S. and that didn't used to happen. I don't know what 3 months ago. Just saying. So that sucks.
Yeah, that's not good. But the people in New Zealand. Let's talk about the people first. I was trying to find. I couldn't quite find the words to describe it. That they are a long way from anything, and it feels like it. I think is how I would describe them. But they are warm people on the whole. Hey.
Oh, I was amazed at how nice the people were, because it's been a while since I've been to Australia, but Australia men, and this is, I know this, I'm being a little stereotypical, but Australian men are kind of like ultra masculine bro guys, is what I remember them being like. And so I was kind of expecting the same from New Zealand, and it wasn't that way at all. They were very nice, very kind, very helpful. I remember we went to the zoo, and the guy was just like, "Where are you?" And he was kind of a younger guy, and he was like, "Where are you from? What else are you gonna do? Are you enjoying it? You like New Zealand? Blah blah." Just really nice. And I don't remember that in Australia, people being like that. So yeah, I was really surprised by that, and we took a boat ride, and the people took time to chat with us, and it was just a lot different than I expected.
In a way, though, New Zealand is a little bit like England in that there's the big city and then everywhere else. So London, to me, bears no resemblance to the rest of England. And in some ways, I think Auckland bears... It's maybe not as stark a contrast as London and the rest of England, but Auckland is very different from the rest of New Zealand.
And I only went to Auckland and the Shire. So
but
what's the difference between the people in Auckland versus Wellington?
Well, I mean, the first thing says everyone that doesn't live in Auckland is scathing about people that live in Auckland, but it's just like people that live in London. People in the north where I come from,
or New York.
They look down on Londoners. Americans look down on New Yorkers, and they look down on the people that don't live in New York, and it's kind of a thing. But they call them Jaffas, which is just another effing Aucklander.
Okay.
But I think it's by far the most progressive, liberal, worldly city in New Zealand, because it's the only really big city. I mean, Wellington's pretty small. Christchurch, in global terms, is pretty small. It's just their towns really. I think in the rest of New Zealand, certainly. So I was in Christchurch, but I spent a lot of time in rural Canterbury, which is the province that Christchurch is in, and a lot of time in rural South Island of New Zealand. And being quiet there is a national pastime. It's like a competition of who can be the quietest. Farmers and people like that in the South Island, they're not chatty. They're friendly, but if they can say something in one word instead of 10, they'll just say it in one word. And people are they're quiet and they're reserved. And if you listen to interviews with famous New Zealand rugby players, a lot of the guys, particularly from farming background, and farming's a huge deal in New Zealand, but a lot of guys from farming backgrounds, they don't say a lot. They're not the most expressive people in the world.
So their podcasts aren't that good?
Oh, they're pretty short, eh? Yeah, there's this kind of a way of saying things. The amount of times I would say something to someone that I thought required further conversation, and they go, "Oh, yep." And then you just go, okay, well, oh yep, that's what you're gonna say. Okay, well, we'll move on. And I actually hung out with a farmer for a few days. We went and stayed on his farm, and I was chatting to him in his pickup truck, and we'd been going about 5 minutes, and he goes, "You don't need to chat on my account." So I just thought, okay, I'll just shut up and sit here in silence. So, I think it's just a bit of a contrast. It's the only big city, and so inevitably you get the kind of people that want to live in a big city. But rural New Zealand, they're kind of quiet folk, super friendly, super warm, but yeah, they're quiet. They like the farm. They like the quiet life.
Well, and I was surprised. I looked it up, the demographics, and Auckland's 30% Asian.
Yeah, I think Auckland has changed a lot. I don't claim to know Auckland well, but I think it's changed a hell of a lot in the last 30 years.
And there's streets, and it looks like you walk down, it's like that looks like a restaurant in Hong Kong, that looks like a restaurant in Tokyo, and which I think is cool because I like Asian food. But I was really surprised walking around the first night we went to dinner and we sat down and it was literally like, I was like, is there like a convention going on? Like it was just like all these like Japanese businessmen and stuff, but it's changed. But I know even that Blackpink, who's like this massive band right now, one of the members there is from New Zealand. So I was kind of surprised by the demographics. And what's interesting about that is it appeared to be that people got along. Like, people, they seem to embrace the natives, and there doesn't seem like to be this like anti-colonial stuff there. And I watched some rugby games in a park, and it was very diverse, and walking around it was very diverse, and I thought that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't claim to be an expert on relationships with the Maori people, who are the native people of New Zealand, but I think they've probably done a better job with that relationship with their native people than probably Canada and Australia and other places that have had a large influx of Europeans and settled the country. So I get the impression relations between the Maori and I guess the Europeans is pretty good. Someone from New Zealand might tell me otherwise, but my understanding when I was there was that it made a lot more progress with that than some other countries.
Yeah. I know they've got everyone has a dark history especially when it comes to colonization, but my impression is they've probably moved on from it better than most. It definitely better than Australia seems to have relationships with Aboriginals.
But they really appreciate and respect and Maori culture, and they make it part of life. I mean, the haka, obviously, famously the All Blacks do the haka before every game. But
they did it at the rugby game I went to.
That's great.
A lot of the signs are in both languages.
Yeah,
which is way different than when the Anglican Church came in and basically kidnapped a bunch of the local kids and wouldn't let them speak their native language and stuff back in the day. So it's nice they've moved on from some of that horrible thing. And
you still see when visiting rugby teams go, they'll often do a kind of Maori welcome and a haka as they come off the plane, and they do the traditional kind of forehead and nose to nose greeting. And it seems like it's a part of New Zealand life, particularly I think in the North Island. The South Island's a little bit more European. But yeah, I think that's a real positive element of New Zealand. I think I'm sure there are issues, but
and not to have spoilers, but New Zealand's my 87th country, and I just absolutely loved Auckland, like just loved it. I mean, I was telling you before we started this, if it wasn't so far away, I would buy a condo there and have a vacation home.
Yeah,
I thought it was awesome, and I'll explain why I think it was awesome, and you can tell me why the rest of New Zealand's more awesome, I guess. But
no, I'm not going to make the case that the rest of Auckland, the rest of New Zealand is better. I think it's different because Auckland's the only kind of big city. Yeah, but go ahead.
And I like cities, so I'd say number one, it's a city, but it's not a massive city that you can't navigate. It's the downtown's very walkable. It is super clean. There's not really graffiti. There's not really homeless people. It doesn't seem like there's crime. There's not like a big police presence. It just seems clean and nice. There's no pollution really. So like I was amazed looking at this, looking up at the buildings. It was about the clearest buildings I've ever seen because there just seems to be no pollution. It's New Zealand's not really known for food, but there is, I think, especially because they've got such a big Asian population, they've got a lot of really cool food options and fish and chips and British influence, and they've got all kinds of Korean restaurants and Japanese restaurants, and I thought that was really cool. Another thing is it's not that expensive. I felt like it was maybe not half price to the U.S., but I would say close to half price. I would say maybe the only thing if you're looking, I'll say what maybe the only thing about the city, and then I'll talk about a couple other things. There's really not good public transportation. There's like a train system, but it seems pretty terrible. You pretty much have to walk or Uber around or drive. Auckland, the actual land mass is really big, but it's all suburbs, so you can really, if you're staying downtown, you really don't need to leave that area. Then the other thing I would say that's awesome about it that hardly any place has is it's got beaches and water, and it's also got mountains. It's got islands you can get to with a ferry in like 20 minutes that are uninhabited. You can go hike. Volcanoes you can go hike. It's just, you just don't see that really anywhere. And I know that the South has even better hiking and better all that stuff. But for a city, it's pretty amazing. Like Denver, to get to the mountains takes a couple hours. Really, to get anywhere decent in the mountains, we're nowhere near the ocean. But yeah, it's like one day we get up in the morning, we go walk down and look at all the yachts, and then we take a ferry and go to a volcano and we go hike the volcano, and it was just so cool, so cool.
Yeah, it's one of those cities where you're just never far from something natural. Where on any street you can probably see forest, or you can see an island, or you can see the sea.
Yes.
No, it's a nice city. It's a really nice.
Well, and there's
city.
a lot of parks.
Yeah.
It's
very
built
green.
Well. Oh yeah, there's tons of huge parks. Parks that are very like European with a bunch of old statues of, like, there's one with Queen Victoria I sent you because I know you love Queen Victoria, and there's the University of Auckland there, so you've got all the cool university stuff. There's rugby parks, and there's awesome museums and zoo, and I thought it was just awesome, like way better than I expected it to be.
Oh really? What were you just going because you hadn't been and it sounded interesting, and then it blew your socks off?
Yeah, I guess I kind of thought of it as like lesser Australia with the Hobbit stuff.
Yeah.
And I liked it. I thought it was awesome. One of my favorite places I've ever been.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Because I think New Zealand's one of those places where most people who go love it, but I know you're kind of a city and you like your museums and your shopping, and I hoped you'd like it, but I was really interested to hear if you would, and that's great to hear that you loved it so much. Well,
and there's cool museums. So the zoo is awesome, and it has a kiwi, which is a national bird of Australia. That is so cool to see. It also was that a joke or a Freudian slip? The what? It was what did I say? The national bird of Australia, you said. Oh, did I say Australia? Sorry. You got to be pretty careful with kiwis. The people suggesting that they're similar to Australia. If there was kiwis in Australia, they would have been killed by scorpions and spiders and all the horrible things in Australia. You know, that's the other nice thing about New Zealand. There's nothing. It doesn't have all those horrible animals. There are no predators at all. Yeah. Sorry. Go on. Yeah. But so the zoo is awesome, and then the only flightless parrot in the world is in New Zealand. So, which is so cool, and they had them at the zoo. They're these big green parrots. Is that a Kia? They almost, I can't remember what it's called. Sorry, go on. It's a big green parrot, and they almost went extinct in like the 1950s. So the Europeans killed 150,000 of them when they came, and in the 50s there was no females left. There's only a handful of males left. They're about to go extinct, and then they found a little colony on some outlying island and started repopulating. Why were the Europeans killing them? For meat? The big reason was not only do they eat stuff off the ground and things, they're big birds, but they also will get on the back of sheep and basically cut with their beak into the back of the sheep and eat their fat. And they won't kill the sheep, and they won't eat like a ton, but it would cause infections on the sheep. So the Europeans are basically just started slaughtering all of them to try to save their flocks of sheep. And you can see them at the zoo, and they are so cool seeing this big flightless parrot walking around in the woods. It is just such a neat thing. I loved it. Loved it. God, I don't know where to start now. What are the best museums then? So there's an art museum, which was just okay. There's a museum of transportation, which was not very good. The main Auckland museum was really surprisingly good. It's this big, huge building. It's also known as Auckland War Museum, and it's kind of like a Roman or Greek style huge building in a park. Very, very traditional. The first floor is like New Zealand history. The second floor is natural history, like dinosaur bones and stuff they found, and then the third floor is their war history. I didn't realize this until I went there, and this is one of the reasons I love traveling, is because you learn things that you'd never know. I didn't realize what a huge deal World War One is in New Zealand. So they sent one out of every. It was still really even more than now part of the British Empire. So they sent one out of every 5 adult men to war.
That's a lot.
And there are war memorials to World War One everywhere. The whole third floor of this huge museum, basically like 80% of it was dedicated to World War One. World War One wasn't as big a deal for them. I think they were more trying to protect their coast, and they were expecting to be attacked.
World War Two wasn't as big a deal.
World War Two wasn't. They thought they were going to get attacked because Australia got attacked by the Japanese, so they were basically shored up waiting to be attacked, and they never were. But World War One, they sent a bunch of their boys over to Europe to fight. So it's very interesting because in the U.S. got into World War One really late. So it's kind of like our forgotten war. Like people don't really even think about World War One in the United States. There, it's still a huge, huge deal.
Yeah. And
I thought that was fascinating.
Percentage-wise, I think they had the biggest losses of any country. In terms of
I know they had the biggest
percentage of
percentage
casualties
that went there.
Yeah, they had the biggest percentage casualties of their population that died in World War One. Yeah. And I think, unlike probably Canada, and quite a few other places, I think New Zealand quite liked being part of the Commonwealth, and that link to England, I think that's more popular there than it is in many countries.
Yeah, they seemed popular. I mean, there was stuff in the museums, and I went to a naval museum too, which you have to take a ferry to get to. I also went to the Maritime Museum, which I thought was wonderful, and all that stuff was very pro-British. They seem really proud of their ancestry to the British, and which I like because my ancestry, like yours, is to the British too.
Yeah, mine's pretty recent. But yeah, I mean, I remember when I was there, if you were a third generation Kiwi, so your granddad was born in New Zealand, that was quite a big deal. And fourth generation Kiwis, that was huge. That's how recent much of the migration has been to New Zealand.
Yeah, and they weren't generally criminals and things like a lot of Australians were that were brought there. They were looking for a better life.
Yeah.
So, which I think is interesting too.
And a huge amount of it is fertile and famously good for rearing sheep. So I think a lot of people that went down there did well.
I like fertile and rearing. Not sheep.
I won't ask you if any fertile rearing went on. But I got to ask you as well about the rugby. What was that like? You went to Eden Park, you watched the Blues, which is the Auckland team, against Crusaders, which is the Canterbury team, my team.
Crusaders is a great name, by the way.
Canterbury Crusaders, yeah. The most successful non-internet, like domestic club team in the Southern Hemisphere, Canterbury Crusaders.
Well, the Blues lost terribly.
They got humped.
Yes, it was really fun, and it was pretty cheap. I got 50-yard line, which is what you call it for American football, right in the middle, first row seats, and they were not very expensive. The park was cool. It was a great size. They did the traditional dancing and stuff at the beginning, and traditional kind of national anthem, and I thought it was super fun, and my son loved it. I watched. You've explained rugby to me before, and I've kind of got a sense of it. I still don't understand why they do the scrum sometimes, but I've got an okay sense of it. And we watched it in the room like a little bit every night, so we could kind of get used to it. But it was awesome, and it's cool. I love doing things that locals do. that's part of, people will say like, why do you go to zoos and why do you go to like local amusement parks and why do you like, and it's like part of the reason I do is because you don't see tourists at those places.
Yeah.
You think you would, but you don't. There's no tourists at Auckland Zoo. It's all people with their little kids or school groups, and I like seeing the locals. I don't want to see a bunch of tourists. And there was not anybody who looked like a tourist because I think we were the only people not wearing jerseys and having our faces painted and stuff that were actually there. So yeah, it was cool.
Rugby is a huge deal in New Zealand.
Huge. I mean, it seemed like basically their only sport is the way it seemed to me that they really care about. It was billboards and everything in the stores is rugby, and I'm sure they have some other stuff, but I don't think anyone really cares about it.
No, basically, kids in New Zealand, they play cricket in the summer, and they play rugby most of the year. And people will kind of give a crap about cricket a little bit, but basically there's one sport, like you say. Nothing comes... There is no other winter sport. I guess there is a soccer league in New Zealand, maybe. I don't even know if there is. There's nothing else. There's no people play tennis, but there's no professional tennis. There's nothing. They just play rugby, and that is it. And it is a national obsession, and the All Blacks are a national obsession. But in Auckland, the Blues, who you went to see, that's a big deal. They're the big team, and they've been very successful down the years.
If our team was called the All Blacks, I think Trump would try to change it to All Whites. But fortunately, they're a little bit more diverse there than.
Well, the soccer team is the All Whites.
Is it really?
Yeah, and then I love this. New Zealand's basketball team is the Tall Blacks.
Is it really?
Yeah, so they always try.
That's hilarious.
There's quite a few good puns around the name. I feel like there's a Small Blacks, but now I'm beginning to question myself what sport everyone would be really small, but maybe. But no, rugby is for people visiting New Zealand, rugby is a huge part of the national psyche. It's a huge part of the culture. In the same way that most British villages will have a pub, there aren't many villages in New Zealand that don't have a rugby club, and that will be the focal point of the social life. And the whole fabric of the community will often revolve around the rugby club. And so many of these All Blacks come from these tiny, tiny villages, farming communities, basically. And there's one pitch with some posts on, and they end up being All Blacks. But rural rugby clubs, particularly, play a huge part in New Zealand. And it's really the one thing that unites the whole nation. Kind of, when New Zealand play, everybody is watching it. You don't go past many houses and pubs where people aren't just glued to the TV, and that's not the case in many places. And it's a unique rugby community, and the All Blacks have been absolutely extraordinary when you look at the population of New Zealand. So they're rightly proud of their rugby teams.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I thought it was cool. And did you go to, it was after your time, I think, like the Shire and Hobbiton and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, so I was super lucky. I got to go to New Zealand as a kid in 1995. And I don't remember it that well, but I know my mum and dad kind of had a crisis meeting and just said to each other, what are we going to do? Like, now we've seen this, we have to live here. And at the time, my dad had just started a new company, and it was beginning to do well, and we just got into the schools they wanted us to get into, and it turned out that they didn't end up moving. But I think in 95, New Zealand was paradise, really. I mean, especially the South Island, there was no one down there. The mass buying up of property from Chinese and Japanese businessmen hadn't really started. It was quaint. There was no crime. It was quiet. I think it was pretty blissful. And then I went back for a full year and worked in a school in Christchurch. So that was summer 2002 to summer 2003. So I haven't been for 22 years. So all my observations are rather dated, but it was pretty amazing back then. Sorry, what was your question? I've forgotten.
Well, the British are there now. You might not realize that. It's been so long.
Yeah, when I went, there were no Europeans. It was just all Yeah, we just lived in mud huts, and yeah. No, sorry, I was so busy reminiscing and trying to remember dates. So
No, it's all right. I think their biggest tourist attraction right now is Hobbiton or the Shire.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, so that was before.
And
I think they were filming Lord of the Rings when I was there.
so we did a day trip there, and it was just like the rest of New Zealand, way better than I expected.
Really?
Yes.
Did you actually recognize some of the places visually?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. So it's actually really interesting, and man, to be the farmer that owns that land, oh my God.
Guys made a few bucks, eh?
Our tour guide said that the Hobbit area is 1% of his farmland, and he makes more from that 1% than he makes from the other 99%.
I bet he makes 100 times more from that 1%.
Oh, it's massive. There's depending on the season, 1,000 to 2,000 visitors a day.
I mean, if you make $1 off each of them, you're a rich person.
It costs a lot more than $1.
Yeah.
So it's 2-hour drive from Auckland. When you get there, you get in a tour bus. It drives you into the Shire, and it's cool. It's got like a video plays, and it's got Peter Jackson, the director of Lord of the Rings, like welcoming you, and then it's got the farmer welcoming you to his land. And basically, what happened was they made the first Lord of the Rings there, and Peter Jackson had found it with like a helicopter, I think, just flying around looking for a place. Knocked on the farmer's door and said, "Hey, I'd like to film, a movie here." And they worked out some sort of deal. And when they built the sets to the first trilogy, they built them out of plywood, and they basically all rotted away and fell apart. And then it was taken back over by sheep because it's sheep land. And then when they built The Hobbit, the farmer, who's smart, said, "Well, you can rebuild it, but I want it built permanent. I want it built with permanent materials, and I want to turn it basically into a tourist attraction, and I want to partner with either New Line or Peter Jackson or whomever from Lord of the Rings." And they went into a partnership with this thing. So when they rebuilt it for The Hobbit, they rebuilt it with better materials. There's 44 Hobbit holes with the doors and stuff, just like the movies. They're different sizes, so some were made for the hobbits to stand by. Some are made for like the wizard to stand by, so it looks smaller. Like they're different sizes. But you go in and you see where Bilbo in the movie runs down. He's like, "I'm going on a great adventure," and he's like running like down the thing, and you walk in on that. You see the area where they had the fireworks display in Fellowship of the Rings. You've got Bilbo's house, and that is only, the door opens to like 2 feet basically into it, so you can get your picture taken. It is so well done and so beautiful, and it's hard to describe how cool it is. And it's one of those places that you try to take pictures of, and it looks cool, but you can't really take pictures of how cool the entire scene looks. And they've got all kinds of little props, and it's like, and they've did such a good job where it's like, okay, well, you can tell this is like where the cheesemaker lives, and this is where a fisherman lives, and this is where the town drunk lives, and you can really see how they gave the different places different personality. And you're on a guided tour, and he walks through. Actually, our tour guide was from Canada, which is strange, but he did a really good job. And then at the end, they built, because they split the tour group into two just because of the size, and they built 2 Hobbit houses, and you basically walk through them to get to the other side and go on to the end of the tour. And they weren't used in the movie, but they hired the designers from the movies to come in and design them, and it is amazing. Like, you walk into it, and it literally is like you're in one of the Hobbit homes, and it's fully furnished and decorated, and you can just wander around, and you can mess with things and touch things, and they don't tell you like, don't touch that, or you keep your hands to yourself. Everything's kind of made. It's very much like being in like Disneyland, how well it was done. And it was like, there was a fireplace with like real fire in it, with wood in it. Like, it was so cool. and then you walk through that. You go to the other side, and then you go down to by like the little mill thing from the movie, and you go to the main building, which is also in the movie, kind of like the main. I don't know what it is, a gathering place for hobbits in the movie or something. And they have a bar in there, and you get a free drink, and they brew like beer there, they brew cider there, and you sit around fireplaces with the other people on the tour and have a drink, and it was just so cool. And
I love your enthusiasm for it.
Oh, and my son loved it, and it just everybody there was so excited to be there, and it's one of those places that, like, I think anybody who's into those movies or like a science fiction or fantasy fan would just absolutely love. And there's not that many places I think like it in the entire world, that you go to this like huge movie set and can wander around and take pictures, and it was so cool. It was so cool. And I noticed my son on the way home, because we had like 1,000,000 hours flight, he watched Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit stuff all the way home, probably looking to see what it was in there, and it was awesome. Awesome.
Sounds like the highlight of the trip.
I think it was probably. I'd hate to say it was a highlight because it's a manufactured thing.
No, it's like fair enough.
there's not really hobbits, so you hate to go there and be like, the best thing there was this manufactured thing, but it was really, really cool. And I think if you did go to Auckland, for more than like a day, you're crazy if you don't go tour that. Like, absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Did you get anywhere else outside the city? Did you go up north to the northern tip? North, it's called Northland. The kind of tip of land that sticks out above Auckland.
No, I did. We did do a ferry to Devonport, which is across the bay, which is kind of like an old British style fishing village. That's not really fishing village anymore. And we walked around there and had lunch. Went and hiked. There's 2 old volcanoes that have like old armaments, and you can walk through like old tunnels that were made and stuff. And then the Naval Museum is there, so that was cool. The Navy even their current Navy has 2,800 people in it. The U.S. has 500,000, so it's not like this huge Navy, but that was cool. And then a couple days later, we took another ferry and went on. I'm not even trying to pronounce it, but it's because it's a like Rarotonga something island, and it basically rose out of the sea 600 years ago in this massive fiery explosion as a volcano. So it's the youngest volcano like that in the world that created an island, and it's a pretty decent island, and it's uninhabited. There's like some ranger shacks on it, and it took a couple hours to hike up to it. And you get up there, and there's caves that you can go through that I did with like my phone light, like climbing down in these caves with my son. And there's bathroom on the island, but there's nowhere to get food or water. There's no restaurants, and that was super cool. So we hiked that, and the cool thing about that is the natives arrived there about 800 years ago, and so 600 years ago, this gigantic volcano came out of the ocean and created this island, and now it's like all lush and stuff. It's got plants all over it, and it's cool to think that people actually stood there on the coast of Auckland and watched this giant thing happen out in the ocean. Like, it's just really cool.
I mean, presumably there was a corresponding earthquake, though.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it totally freaked him out.
Yeah.
God is pissed at us, like like somebody did something.
Yeah, sadly.
But to see it,
go on.
Yeah. Oh, so to see it back then must have just been insane with all the steam and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's cool.
Sadly, earthquakes have been an increasing part of New Zealand life in the last few years, and Christchurch, which is the city I used to live in, has obviously got not destroyed by the earthquake, but is now unrecognisable from the city I was in. So,
really?
Oh yeah, it's 2008, I think, was the earthquake, and it just flattened it. I mean, the devastation was, I hate the word unbelievable, but scarcely believable. Christchurch is just unrecognisable from what it was 20 years ago, because they haven't put up any tall buildings. A lot of it they just haven't rebuilt. yeah, no, it was just devastation and destruction. Yeah, so sadly, it's being on the volcanic. What's it called again? The divide. You know anyway, on a tectonic, being right on those tectonic plates.
Oh yeah.
And having a lot of volcanic action has made New Zealand amazing, but it's also caused some problems. But yeah, it's geologically it's a pretty volatile place. It wouldn't write off another island appearing at some stage.
Yeah. It was really, really cool. What else in New Zealand would you recommend that are like must-sees if people are going to be there for very long?
I mean, as covered frequently on this podcast, I'm more into kind of natural wonders, and New Zealand is amazing for that. So, I mean, wow, working my way north to south, Northland and 90 Mile Beach at the tip of New Zealand is amazing. You can see where the Pacific meets the Tasman, which is pretty cool. You can literally see two different coloured oceans hitting each other. Mount Maunganui and Hawke's Bay, Taranaki, Taupo, all just beautiful places. The sounds between the North and the South Islands, taking the ferry from the North Island to the South Island and vice versa, has got to be one of the most scenic ferry rides on the planet. Literally, it's like being in Norway. Abel Tasman National Park is legendary on the South Island. You can either hike along its length or canoe along its length, and then they'll pick you up in a water taxi. And then just that massive spine of mountains down the middle of the South Island, Mount Cook, Mount Aspiring. Arthur's Pass is kind of one of the legendary roads over it. Whale watching in Kaikoura. I mean, Queenstown's one of the extreme sports capital of the world. There's just a ton to do, but I think there's more outside Auckland. I would say there's more to do if you like outdoor sports than if you're a culture vulture.
And when you watch Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and you see them on their quest and you see all those gigantic mountains and all those crazy landscapes, that's all south.
Yeah. So the North Island's got some cool mountains. Around Taranaki particularly and Taupo, there are some mountains, but the big, wild, glaciated, big beasts are down in the South Island. And again, you talk about New Zealand being geologically unstable. About 20, 30 years ago, the top fell off Mount Cook, and it's now 12 meters shorter than it used to be, and it looks completely different.
Did they find it?
I think they found it in about 5 million pieces at the bottom. So, the South Island, the mountains in the South Island are wild. A friend of mine is a mountain guide in the French Alps. Really, really, really at the cutting edge of mountain sports. And he's done a few trips to New Zealand, and he was kind of wide-eyed talking about how wild it was. The glaciers are huge and chewed up. If you walk in, it could be 2-3 days hiking in, really jumbled glaciers, wild terrain. The weather's terrible. It is full on down there. Nowadays, actually, the irony is helicopters emit a lot of carbon, but because of climate change, most people now use helicopters to access the high mountains because approaches have got so chewed up by glacial recession. But yeah, I'm jabbering now, but it's wild. It's a really wild place, and I think one thing I really love about New Zealand, and I'd recommend if you ever have the right contacts, but just going to one of the sheep stations and the farms down there is great. I mean, peaceful. It's next level peaceful. Some of these farms are huge, and yeah, it's just so quiet. Those country roads and linking all these farms, and then about every hour there'll be a little village with a rugby club. It's real, true rural living.
A lot of rearing sheep.
A ton of rearing sheep. I mean, I couldn't possibly comment, but yeah, the sheep backed into me. But no,
I was just helping over the fence.
It's it's kind of rural living at its most charming and romantic, I would say. A lot of rural New Zealand. It's kind of what you wish life could be like in a way. Just people driving slowly and with no rush, no need to be anywhere anytime soon. It's really cool in that respect. And as I say, some of those sheep stations. We went to a sheep station that was 100,000 acres.
You keep talking about sheep a lot.
I know it's a thing. I mean, if you're in New Zealand, people are pretty keen on the sheep. I wouldn't want to comment how keen and in what. No, I'm only kidding.
The thing that's amazing is we talk about, America is such a young country and Canada's a young country. New Zealand was completely uninhabited until 800 years ago.
Yeah. And Europeans arrived so much later in New Zealand than they did in North America.
So much later, yeah. And by the time when the natives landed, there was these 10-foot moa, these gigantic flightless birds all over New Zealand, and they're the only birds ever that don't have wings at all.
Wow.
So like an ostrich has wings and they flap it when they run. The moa had no wings at all. No little arms like a T-Rex or anything. They're just these 10-foot tall gigantic birds. And then there was gigantic eagles that fed off the sick and young of the emus, and they were all killed off before the Europeans got there. Unfortunately, there's one kind of recreated one at the museum that's amazing. You can't believe how massive that thing is.
Far bigger than eagles we have now.
Oh yeah, the biggest. No, they have a recreation of the moa, the walking ground giant bird. The eagles were bigger than any eagles that are now. And then you have the ground parrots, and you've had the kiwis all over, and there's a bunch of other birds in it that are extinct, and some other animals that are extinct, and but it must have just been crazy when they first landed, and it's still an amazing place. But it's interesting to think about how that is and how it's changed over the years, but it's still really, really cool.
I just love how on fire you are about New Zealand, because I thought you might come back and go, yeah, it was fun, yeah, it was cool, glad I've been, but yeah. I love that you're so into it, because I suppose as well, I was 18 when I was there, and I was obviously, when you're 18, you don't even know how to give a crap about life, so you like the definition of carefree. So my memories of it are so fond, partly because you're just at a stage in your life you can never replicate, but it's cool that you liked it so much.
Yeah, and I even noticed talking to my son, because he's younger than I am, of course, and when we're walking around and I'm going, there's no pollution, there's no trash, there's no this, it feels so safe. And he would say, but I don't think he really understands, because he's not old enough and he hasn't really traveled a ton to understand how rare some of those things are. He understood, like, I can't believe there's hiking and a beach right by each other, and I can't believe there's volcanoes, and he understood that aspect of it, but the actual, like, coolness of the city being so nice, he didn't really grasp yet.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think my line on New Zealand is that I'm always envious of people who are from there, because if you were to go and live there, I think it would feel an awfully long way from your family, and it would be an awfully long way unless you move from Sydney. Anywhere you move from to go and live in New Zealand, you're going to be a hell of a long way from your family, your friends, and everything you know, and it would feel like you're a long way away. But I was always envious of people who were from there, because if that was your world and your family were there and you just got to live there, it's kind of a pretty idyllic place to live.
I don't know why anybody, if they actually were from there, would leave, unless you had family elsewhere or work or something. I just can't imagine to be like, you know what, I'm going to leave this place and I'm going to move to Detroit.
Yeah, and one thing, Kiwis always go back. I'm thinking of all the Kiwis I've met, both in New Zealand and abroad, and I can think of one couple I know, a Kiwi couple, who have not ended up back in New Zealand. I was dating a Kiwi girl for about a year and a half, and she was always, to give her a credit, was always completely straightforward. She said, "I'll live wherever you want to live for a while and stuff, but I want to live in New Zealand, and I will only live in New Zealand." And I find generally Kiwis go back. It's an interesting thing, actually. A lot of Kiwis spend time overseas and then go back, and it's so commonly done that people call it OE, overseas experience. So loads of people will refer to their OE, and that means when they lived in London for 2 years, that they lived in New York for 2 years.
That's interesting.
But it's so commonly done that they actually have a kind of slang for it. But yeah, generally they go back, and you can see why.
Why'd you guys break up?
Well, there's a story. perhaps not podcast suitable. It would. You know what? It would have. I mean, it wasn't the right person, but you could have a great life. Yeah, it was you, not me. You could have a great life down there. But I mean, obviously, the thing for me was, and that, although I've ended up living a long way away from my family and friends, I go back to Europe, I don't know, 3-4 times a year from here, and it's not that big a deal. You just get on the plane, you wake up, and you're in England. You are further from... In New Zealand, the journey is daunting to get back, so you are further. Yeah, New Zealand. I love New Zealand. I haven't been for a long time. I may be romanticising it, but I'm pleased to hear that maybe I'm not romanticising it, and maybe it's just great after all. But here's a thing, actually, tying together the fact that New Zealand's great and rugby, which we talked about. So just quickly, every 4 years, the British and Irish Lions get put together. So that's the best players from England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. And they tour either South Africa, Australia or New Zealand. So they go to South Africa, 4 years later they go to Australia, 4 years later go to New Zealand. So they only go to each of the places once every 12 years. So you could play for the All Blacks for 10 years and the British and Irish Lions never come during your career. So when the Lions go to New Zealand every 12 years, it's a huge deal. And I would love to go. One of my kind of bucket list trips is to follow the Lions tour. So you go to the game every Saturday, you go to the Lions game, and then in between you kind of travel slowly to the next venue for the next game. And it's just an excuse to drive around in a camper van and have a good time. And when the Lions are there, New Zealand's just on fire with Lions mania. It's a huge deal. They play a 3-part series against the All Blacks. They play 3 matches and it's best of 3. And I've always wanted to go and follow a Lions tour and drive around New Zealand in a camper van. So let's do it.
That does sound fun. Yeah, that does sound fun.
It would be amazing. And they're in Australia this year, so yeah, we either do it 4 years from now or we do it 16 years from now. That's the next
16 years. I'm gonna be pretty old in 16 years. You'll still be a young man, but I'll be pretty old.
I'll be knocking on. But yeah, that's been on my bucket list. So I'm just throwing that out there. If in the next 4 years I suddenly have enough money that I can just drop work and life for 6 weeks and follow the Lions around New Zealand, we'll do it. And if not, we're just going to have to be 2 old guys doing it in 16 years.
Okay.
Deal?
Deal.
All right. That was fun. I enjoyed reminiscing, and it warms my heart that you love New Zealand so much, because
I did. It was a great place, and I look forward to our next chat.
Yeah, I look forward to our trip in 16 years.
Me too.